Thank you. It's an honor to be here. CET is such a wonderful, wonderful group to be involved with in any way. I'm just really happy about that. So I want to talk about, the world seems to have slipped past the old concept of mastery. This is a concept that it's artificial to a large extent. It comes with the form factor of books, with, in many ways, the limitations of books. That books can only be this big, they can't be, that big. And very few of them relatively get published, so that there's a type of authority that has been granted to books by that traditional publishing process, which no longer holds, because now things can get as big as they need to be. We're not going to run out of space on the web, on the internet, and anybody can publish, for better or for worse. Personally, I think by far it's for better. So as books slip away as the symbol and the medium of knowledge, we are faced very directly. It's right in our face how limited the old world of print was. You do a simple search, in this case for information overload, and you get millions of hits. You get millions of hits. So every time we do a search, right in our face, we're being told there's too much for any one human to master or to know. In fact, the mastery, it seems to me, is of content just isn't even possible as a concept, nor is it often helpful to have as our model, even though so much of our traditional educational systems have been built upon this concept, have assumed it. So it's possible, I think it's easy to despair if mastery isn't possible, and yet into this breach comes a generation that has in many, many different ways on the web addressed the problem that the removal of this artificial type of mastery poses. They are reinventing the way of navigating, not reinventing, they are inventing a way of navigating what is practically an infinite space of knowledge and ideas and information and lies and porn and everything else. So I want to take just one example of it. It should be a very familiar example to many of you. How many of you know Reddit, have used Reddit at any point? Okay, some. So you're going to go there perhaps because somebody at the front of the stage is saying it's a remarkable place, and you're going to be absolutely dismayed. I will just tell you, you're going to go and wonder why any serious person, somebody who's actually wearing a sports coat, because apparently he's an American, or so I've been told. It's actually a body image thing, but we don't need to get into that. Why somebody in a sports coat would actually tell you, go look at this site, because this site at its worst is horrible, it's dreadful, it's misogynistic, it's pornographic, it's abusive, it's bullying, at its worst, it is the worst. At its best, it's really, really good. So Reddit is a site at which anybody can nominate a link, and it gets upvoted or downvoted by anybody who wants to, and then there are comment threads, and those comments also are upvoted or downvoted. And so what shows up on the homepage, and there are also tens of thousands of what they call subreddits, which are basically topical discussion boards. The homepage that you go to, they pick 25 of these different subreddits that they think are popular or useful. Reddit itself does, and so that's what you're seeing. And it includes stuff I can promise you will be sorry you clicked on. Nevertheless, it's a pretty amazing site. It also is a hugely popular site. So I didn't even actually, I just screen captured the thing I just blew past. Lord knows what was on it. So one of the subreddits that's a particularly good one, is called Ask Science, and unsurprisingly, it's a place where people pose questions, post links to scientific articles or ask questions about it. And so pretty much at random, I've picked one here, which is it strictly impossible for two human beings to have the exact same genetic code, or is it just astronomically improbable? So, okay, that's an interesting question. And it gets, the top voted answers are actually quite helpful. It gets a good answer. So I actually can't read it. Well, I can read it. Can I read it from here? Yeah, I can read it from here. So yeah, it's pretty much impossible in practice, but technically it could happen in theory. And then somebody replies to that. Sorry, I'm fumbling here. Yes, this sounds like one of those technically it's possible for you to walk into a wall and quantum tunnel through it kind of gigs, which makes, sort of sounds like that's going to be difficult, but that... Yeah. No, I just clicked out of the presentation. I'm not rated to use a... pardon me. That's not embarrassing. No, I should not be an idiot. And we're back. You know, I'm going to stay safely behind here. Okay, so then we get an explanation of how difficult it is to tunnel through a wall, quantum tunnel, whatever that might mean. Every single subatomic particle in your body would have to spontaneously tunnel through the same barrier at the same time and spontaneously reassemble back into you. Okay, that sounds difficult. And here it is explained a little more vividly. How unlikely is that? It's like winning the Powerball, a national lottery or state lottery, 100 million times every single nanosecond since the beginning of the universe. So that's sounding even less likely. And then, in case you're wondering about that, somebody shows his or her work. Here it is. And the math, I will look to the physicists or mathematicians to tell me whether the math is good. I'm assuming that it actually is pretty good. Because if it's not, generally there will be a comment underneath it disputing it. So this actually turns out to be a site that has its own system of knowing, exploring, answering questions, verifying. But if you look further down the thread, very typically at Reddit, it gets a little bit funny. Now, I picked this more or less at random. This is not very funny, but it'll give you a little taste of it. The hard part, someone says, is finding people willing to watch you try over and over again so they can verify your claims. I mean, that's hilarious by itself. And then somebody says, no, that's the easy part. If you ask me to hang out and watch you walk into a wall all day, I'll happily agree. So the threads often get funnier than that, but the point is that when you take the paper away from knowledge, it turns out to be funny, that we actually enjoy knowing and will make jokes and entertain ourselves. Somehow the educational system, and it's not just the educational system, has decided that knowledge has to be serious and not fun. Take away those restrictions, put it into the hands of people who are at this board because they're interested, and suddenly it turns entertaining. And it also goes wildly off course. So this is not wildly off, but somebody says, well, could we clone, if we cloned Abraham Lincoln, would he have Marfan's disease, that clone, which Lincoln is suspected of having suffered from? And we get a response that's fairly serious about it, and these sorts of discussions can go on for many, many responses and dive off into other topics. And there's a nice polite answer here as well. So one of the things that we see in this form of digressiveness is that along with the limitations of space that books have enforced, there's also been a silent insistence, because pages are sequential, that the right way to think, the shape of knowledge, is linear. You start at A, you have a deductive or inductive argument, you get all the way to Z. And that's the way that the world is, we thought. That's how God structured the world, so that it would be in these long chains of reasoning. And it turns out, well, no, I mean, that may be true. It's probably not, but it may be true. But it puts you in the position of taking your readers, if you're an author, or taking your students, if you're a teacher, on a long course to a fixed end, and you know how to get there. And when they want to hop off the bus because there's so much interesting in the world, you cannot let them. You have to get them from A to Z. That is your job. If you're a writer, it's so they'll get to the end of the book. If you're a teacher, it's so they will pass their exams. This discourages sort of this discursive exploration that we see naturally occurring when we take away the paper restrictions. So here are some lessons, and then I want to talk very quickly about how maybe we as adults and educators can respond to this. So some lessons from Reddit. If you go on Reddit, you learn some things just by being there. You learn that anybody can join. It's an open site. Anybody can join any conversation. That there are interests that are shared by hundreds and thousands and sometimes tens of thousands of people, and sometimes those interests are really unpredictable. You learn at Reddit that, yeah, people do use credentials. Credentials sometimes help, but they are always introduced casually. So in the thread that I showed you, a typical sort of, if it were a geneticist or a physicist who was popping in with a very technical answer, typically the person will say, physicist here, and that is the extent of the credentialing. And if the person is lying, that person is only going to be found out if she's wrong, if she got her math wrong. Otherwise, the credential is simply sort of a friendly nod. It's not an attempt to lord it over others and to squash conversation, quite the opposite. You learn at Reddit that it only works because there are norms. If there were not norms, they're very specific to Reddit, and some of them are a little weird. If there weren't norms, then these conversations would not know how to succeed. Norms, implicit norms, are vital, and not just at Reddit, of course. We learned that at Reddit that there's way too much. You can spend all day reading Reddit. Some of us have, to our regret the next day. There is way too much, which means also in reading this way too much, it's the back and forth, it's the argument, it's the conversation, it's the jokes that show us that the knowledge exists not in any one person, not even if she says physicist here. It exists in the thread, which is to say it exists in the network. The network knows more than any one individual can. And if you are able to make a network that is capable of engaging productively, that is where the knowledge lives, not in any one of the comments. And I think the last lesson I'll point to from Reddit is that you discover that the world is way more interesting than anybody ever told you. The stupidest little question, something that you never thought of, something that's ridiculous, something that seems crazy, can spawn a thread that's 1,000 comments long and is fascinating and spins out its own unpredictable threads of conversation. So really quickly, how do we prepare our students? If this is so first of all, this is one way that our students, our children, have invented to be knowledgeable, a way to deal with the overwhelming amount of information that is available to them. From my point of view, Reddit is a very successful one. We can all think of sites that are not as successful. They are inventing this for themselves, and they're doing a pretty good job of it. So how do we prepare our students? I want to suggest 4 things. All of these are fast. The first is competency still count. You can't be a brain surgeon and have even have one of the virtual displays that we saw that was so awesome here today, and have it on because you want to ask somebody where the cerebellum is. You better know where that is. I mean, there's a basic level of competency that we still need to teach, and we still need our students to get certified in because the economy works that way, and that's a good thing to do. And as part of this, there's a core set of literacies that we'll be talking about more tomorrow, including even maybe formal logic, but certainly informal logic and fallacies, and the new web fallacies that we need to warn our students about. Second thing is that we have, for too long in our culture, treated knowledge as a content, when in fact we have this other model that's been with us all the time, which is scholarship. Scholarship is a field of people who know stuff and care about stuff, but who disagree with one another. In relationship to one another, scholarship has always been a network. Now it is actually a visible network that anybody can join. And it seems to me this is a far better model, both a more accurate and also a more useful and inviting model for knowledge than the content-based one we have. If we can give our students an idea of what scholarship is like, we will, I think, have succeeded wildly. Third is that the books have carried a certain authority simply because they were so scarce and had to go through a filtering process. And so if you read something in a book, you were likely to, probably should find it acceptable. Books have a certain sort of authority. On the web, we've seen something very different happen because anybody can publish anything they want on the web. Being published on the web does not make what you say more likely to be true. So we have other markers and other procedures, and one of them is to acknowledge fallibility. This is something that Wikipedia is very good at. It will put up a notice like that, which announces that an article is not reliable. Wikipedia's willingness to announce its own fallibility makes it more credible, which is exactly how, for example, old encyclopedias and other printed forms did not work. They hid their fallibility, and they hid the processes by which knowledge was developed, as if it were not a human product, but it is. And at Wikipedia, they're very happy to show you. They insist on showing you the human processes that came up with this human product called knowledge. So this is one of the talk pages. at Wikipedia that accompany all of the pages. And then finally, on the web, we are seeing this generation start to assume that learning should be something in public, that learning something by yourself, you being the only recipient of knowledge, if you can avoid it, is selfish. So at sites like Stack Overflow, people engage with one another in public, developing knowledge for free and making it available to everyone. And teaching students how to do this, teaching them that they have a responsibility whenever possible to engage with others in public by posting, by linking, by the basic sort of stuff, that is something that's crucial. That's how we will get past not only making knowledge collaborative, which is very, very important, and in addition, recognizing it as social, but also understanding it as networked. Thank you very much.